Hey, everybody. Welcome to this fun episode with Tilly Storm of the Multi-Orgasmic Millionaire podcast. So I was on Tilly's podcast. I think you were actually one of the first podcasts I was a guest on.
Well, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome enough that you're willing to come on mine. So that's good. I didn't even have a podcast then, though. So it's fun. Feels like a full circle moment. So let me introduce Tilly officially to you guys. Tilly Storm is a holistic sex and intimacy coach for millionaires seeking to embody their pleasure and have the best sex of their lives. Host of the Multi-Orgasmic Millionaire podcast since 2017, she's been recognized as one of the top 20 sex coaches in the world by the Coach Foundation, and her podcast has reached over 300,000 listeners. As a certified sex and intimacy coach, Tilly uses deep transformational tools and techniques inspired from the Taoist and Tantric arts, somatic healing, psychotherapy, and a variety of coaching modalities to support high-achieving men and women to experience epic sex and pleasure in the bedroom and beyond. Check her out at tillystorm.com. So thank you so much, Tilly, for joining me. It's cool that you've been doing this. I didn't even realize you had your podcast. It was almost 6 years.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. So tell us, how did you even get into this field? I mean, most of us didn't start out in this field, so I feel like there's usually some kind of slightly interesting winding story. So how did you wind up here?
Yeah, for sure. Well, which I think is maybe timely with the topic we're going to be discussing today, but I grew up Southern Baptist, right outside of New Orleans, Louisiana. And I, had a lot of shaming around walking out of the bathroom naked when I was 6 years old. I remember my parents fussing at me one time, and that being like a really big imprinting moment for me. My parents never talked to me about sex. I hid my period from my mom for like a year, all of those things. And I had children when I was young, fairly young. I was 23 when I had my first, 26 with my second. And then when I was 27, I was married at the time, and my husband had made a comment about how I was only able to orgasm in one way. And I also, at the same time he told me that, I was thinking, okay, there's got to be more to pleasure and sex than this, because I'm 27 years old, and if this is it, someone shoot me now. I don't understand what all the hype is about.
Yeah.
I had two children. Even though I'm, I guess, beautiful by traditional beauty standards, tall and thin, my boobs were so saggy and gross. I hated them. I did not want to have sex with the lights on. I was so uncomfortable in my body. I wanted to be that woman that tried kinky things and tried new things sexually with my husband at the time. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't. And I couldn't figure out okay, why do I feel so shy and embarrassed and uncomfortable in my body and with sex?
Yeah.
So that led me to read a ton of books, and that was 2015, and then I think somewhere around there. And then I learned and heard about the jade egg practice, which is something that I now teach. So I did that, and within 2 months of doing it, it changed my life forever.
Wow. Yeah. I'm going to ask you more about that too.
Yeah, sure. Well, if some of you listening have heard of Gwyneth Paltrow and her jade eggs and goop and all that stuff, she talks about the jade eggs all the time. So the jade egg is something that I did, and I literally woke up after 2 months of doing the practice, and it was all of that religious conditioning and shame and discomfort in my body, it was all gone overnight. And I was like, oh my God, how does not everyone know about this?
That's wild.
Yeah.
So kind of doing these, and I don't know that much about it. Is it physical exercises you're doing, or is there an emotional, spiritual component?
Yeah,
to it?
It's definitely all things physical and emotional and spiritual. It's a holistic sex tool from the Taoist tradition. It was brought over to the United States about 45 years ago by Montauk Chia. He's a Taoist master. It's funny because it was a he who brought over that.
Yeah. That is interesting. I was a little surprised by that. Okay.
Yeah, but the practice has been modernized for the needs of women today and people who have a hard time getting out of their head in sex, women who have a difficult time having orgasms in different ways, women who aren't having very satisfying, pleasurable sexual experiences. The jade egg is the quickest, fastest way to help you experience more pleasure and just a better connection with your body and feeling like you can accept and love your body and all those sorts of things. So yeah, that's what it's about. So I got into it after that, and I signed up to do a sex, love, relationship coaching training that took me 2 years to do, and I got certified in all the things sex coaching. So here we are.
So cool. So and then you left that marriage at some point, right?
Yeah, right when I started my business. It was a very tragic ending. It was it was not fun. But and I don't divulge it on the airwaves, but it wasn't like I want to get divorced, let's get divorced. It was a very tragic ending. Yeah.
Got it. But it seems like you're in a better place now and have been on this amazing journey.
Yeah. I've been with my partner for 3 years now, so yeah, all good.
And I just think it's cool. I love viewing sex as a journey. And so it's really cool to hear like where you started and the journey you went through. And then, winding up now where, you have this long running podcast and this career and have done your own personal transformative work, which I actually think is really important. And since I kind of came through more of an academic path to this work, it's not emphasized. I do have my own path and I have done my own work, but it wasn't required.
I know.
So sometimes I'm like, I don't think you can require people to like go do sexual things, but like, I feel like we should. And we should do them even if they're not required.
Yeah, honestly, that's why I chose the training that I did, because I had a very high academic background as well. I had already received a master's degree. I had actually went to school to be an OBGYN. So I was all in academia as well. But when I found the training and chose the training I chose it because it required doing your own thing. Like literally the first third of the program was doing your own internal work. And to me, that's
amazing.
Like there's something when you work with someone that's done their own work, like you've been doing, like there's this level of trust and embodiment and transmission that a teacher holds when they have done that. Yeah,
absolutely. Totally agree with you. Okay, so our real topic today is not going to be the jade egg and Tilly's journey, although we can keep going on those probably for a while. But we're going to talk about religious shame and guilt, which is part of your story. So I appreciate you sharing that. And it's actually a little bit of my story as well, which I think I'm realizing more recently that I was like, oh, that actually was part of my story, wasn't it? But yeah, you mentioned, specifically having some clients recently where you were really getting into the religious shame and guilt and like helping them kind of unpack that and heal from that and move on. I would love to hear more about like, what do you see with these types of clients? Like where are they at when they come to you? What have they kind of gone through or what's led to some of the shame and guilt?
Well, I work with some very high level clients and a lot of them come to me and they don't know what's going on. They may have done some therapy before and they don't understand why things aren't shifting and changing. A lot of them have the very perfectionist identity. Let me just pretend like everything on the outside is okay. I put on my happy face and I'm going to push through and I'm going to act like everything is perfect, including my marriage, even though we haven't had sex in 3 months, right? Or their husbands just work all the time and they are having a really hard time connecting with them. So what I often see is that there's usually a pattern with this perfectionist type woman who appears to have it all together and has it all, right? and she's trying to hold up that image, and sexually she feels like the biggest fraud, like she's just trying to sound like a porn star. She's just kind of doing it out of obligation. There's not a lot of pleasure in it for her. And a lot of that, when I work with people, it stems from just trying to be what you think you should be sexually, but not really having any sense of connection with your original sexual essence, which the religion that you probably got brought up ekes out of you completely.
So say more about that, because you mentioned when we were emailing that, you know, sometimes these people are actually quite sexual beings, but, you know, what kind of messages are they getting to religion, and like, does that kind of just squash their sexuality?
It goes one of two ways.
What happens?
One, they're so sexual, and I have a couple of clients right now where this is the thing. It's not that they lack sexual desire or don't want sex. It's that they get so obsessed with having a particular sexual experience of like, I want to have this orgasm in this way, and if I can't figure out how to get it, because they've achieved all of the things that like anything they want, they can snap their fingers and they get, but then there's this thing that they can't make their body do, and it's like a freaking obsession. So they'll get really into like, you know, I want to be able to have an orgasm from penetration. I can only have a clitoral orgasm, or I can only use a vibrator. And like, if I can't achieve this thing, I don't know what I'm going to do. Right. Or it goes the other way, where they're just so disinterested in it, and there's no pleasure, and they're not having any orgasms because they're not, you know, they've just connected from their sexuality in general. So it's like a hyper trauma response or a hypo response.
Yeah, that is interesting. So it's kind of polarizing and I hear that question too about like, I'm not having like a real orgasm because it's not just from penetration. Like, what do you tell those people? Because that's definitely a thing.
Oh, those people, God bless them. It's a lot about unwinding the conditioning. Like I am a firm believer that all women can have whatever type of orgasm they want. So I preach that, and I agree with that. So I will help them have what they want, but they have to learn to let go of the goal. Yes. Because as you know, I'm sure that's the number one killer of any sort of pleasure. And it's just type of orgasmic experience is trying to have
it's like a recipe for being anxious and in your head and totally not present.
Exactly. Which is what I have to teach them how to stop doing, how to clear the root of anxiety, which has a lot to do with guilt and shame. We got to get the perfectionist identity out of the picture and empower something else. Where's your inner sex goddess? How do we get you in touch with your inner sex goddess? And how do we leave this part aside and take it out of your current sex life? Right? So that's some of the inner work that's got to go on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess I'm curious, how do these people relate to their religion? So are they still part of these religions that are, you know, either...
Some of them are.
Okay. So because that I think is interesting to me, is like, how do you work with people who maybe come from, you know, like a fundamentalist Christian background or a Mormon background or something that's, you know, a little bit more extreme, but then kind of want to be really like sexually free, and, you know, so like how can they reconcile those two? Like, how does that work?
I have only had one client that I took on that quit because she was like, she was Catholic and still practicing. She's like, I can't do this. Like, God can't get out of my bedroom. And I'm like, okay, well, then we can't work together. So my work, it involves all doing self-pleasure practices and sexual training. So that's the question I have to pose to the people who still are in the religion. I've worked with many Mormons. They actually make really great clients because they show up and do all the things.
I would think so too. Yeah, I think I mentioned too, I've also worked with some Mormons or former Mormons. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've worked with several Jehovah's Witnesses and many fundamentalist Christians. And as long as you can accept the fact that you're going to be told to self-pleasure, and if you can find peace with that and be at peace with that, then I can take people on. But if they can't, some of them can't, then I can't work with that.
Okay. So you're just really upfront about it, and then they're usually fine with it if they choose to work with you. That's cool. Yeah. One of the things I have found, because I'm curious if you have found this at all, I almost sometimes think there's like a little advantage almost of like people who grew up in more of like an extreme, more fundamentalist religious way, because I find that those people really start questioning things that maybe if you grew up in more of like an average way, those people maybe don't question as much. Like, do you see that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, religious trauma is real.
Yeah.
It's very real. I had it. And I knew that's what was holding me back. So when my husband at the time had said, you can only have an orgasm in one way, what's that about? I inherently knew the source of it. I was like, oh, it's because of all of the shit that I got raised with.
Yeah.
So I just knew that. Some people I have to teach that and help them understand, like, here's why you don't feel safe to have sexual desire. And if the few moments that you did have sexual desire and lust and, that energy flowing through you, the few times that you may have felt it, you just shut it down because you learned early on that wasn't safe to have. Mom would catch you and fuss, all of those things. It really takes a person out of their body and puts them in their head. So for people to make that connection of like, oh, I go into my head because it's safe to be up there. It's not safe to be in my body because I get caught and fussed at and told I'm a terrible person. I should never do that again.
Yeah. And I do think some of those like childhood things stick with people. I've also had clients who like got caught masturbating as a child, and got shamed. Yeah. And then it's interesting and sometimes tough doing this work when you're just talking to your friends who are parents or hearing stories about like, oh, well, I caught my kid doing blah, blah, blah. And that's so terrible. Or I shut that down right away. And I'm like, like cringing and worrying about your child's, traumatization from this. But people are doing the best they can. And I also think it's like the parents have also received all these messages, from, religion or society or their parents about, what's okay and what's not okay. So, and you're a parent too. I mean, so what are your thoughts about kind of like undoing like the cycle generationally of like discomfort and all that?
Well, I've been asked this on like so many mom podcasts that I've been on, but it's all the same thing. Like, do the work yourself because you're not going to break it. Kids can see through that energy. Like, you can try and be like, oh, no, it's okay. Oh, no, they know better. If you have your own fear, shame, guilt going on and you try and act like it's all okay, they know that it's really not. Okay. They can sense that within you. Yeah. When you make it not okay, then it's not going to be okay for them because you aren't okay with your own sexuality. You're not comfortable talking about it. Like, I mean, here's the litmus test, right? How much do you fear having that conversation with your kid? That's just how much fear, shame, and guilt you've got going on inside of you that you're going to pass down to them, whether you want to or not. And until you do the work, they're going to get it too.
Yeah. And actually it's interesting because, I'm 42 now, but like my mom listens to my podcast, but we never had a sex talk when I was growing up, and I was raised Catholic, and I wouldn't say it was like super strict Catholic or anything, but he definitely got the message that, don't have sex before marriage. That's a sin. But then I also was aware that most people did anyways. And, you also get these mixed messages from the culture of like, it's good to be sexy and attractive and you want to be, wanted and desirable and like all of those things. But then also you're going to get all these diseases and you're going to get pregnant and then you're going to be like, bring shame upon your family if you like get pregnant before you're married, so it's like all of this kind of pressure, I feel like, and intensity. And so for me, that did sink in. Like I was like, okay, I'm sold. This is scary and bad stuff can happen. And so, yeah, I felt impacted in that way. And there was also, I think, discomfort with my body. I don't know 100% where that came from, but like you're mentioning the idea that a lot of religion doesn't want people to masturbate, that can be like a no-no or considered a sin as well. And I think where I think it can be challenging is like, I know what my beliefs are, and I don't want to like, try and tell someone like, don't believe this about your religion, or, like, cause I'm like, if this works for you spiritually, like, yeah, you should still do it. I'm curious, like, as you work with people, do you see them shift their stance on some of these things?
Most of them that come to me are open to
They're already
new ways of being and new ideas. There's, I would say, about 70-ish% of the people that end up working with me that have come from a religious background, they're not in it anymore.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Maybe the 30%, they still go to church, they still do the thing, but they're also very aware that not everything in their religion is perfect. And that some of the teachings, that maybe they're being taught and skewed in a certain way, and maybe that's not really what the religion is about. And some of them are recognizing that, and they're like, no, like, I believe my religion and what they teach for the most part, but like when it comes to sex and relationship, I think that maybe they didn't get it quite right, and that's why I'm here with Tilly, right?
Yeah, I like that, because it's like, take what you like and leave the rest. Like, I'm a big fan of that general expression. Very few, I don't know, books, religions, teachers have it like 100% right,
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we kind of make up our own minds. But that also doesn't mean you have to throw the whole thing out if something about it is working for you. So if somebody listening is struggling with this, like, okay, I kind of know I have some of that religious guilt or shame, like, where would you recommend that they start to kind of, undo some of that?
Well, first, if you can even recognize and be aware that might be the source of any sexual issues or hangups or blocks that you might be having, that's huge, first of all. So count yourself very self-aware and conscious, because there aren't many people who even come to that realization on their own without having support from someone like you or from me. So there's got to be some level of self-awareness. And then what I always teach is there's 3 parts to healing and integrating sexual shame and guilt and fear.
Okay.
So there's 1, the inner work. Okay. So we got to work on the version of you that is currently showing up in your sex life and relationship. That's disempowered, that has wounds, that has messages that you don't logically agree with, that aren't true, but they're still in your body. So we got to work with unwinding those stories and healing and integrating them and choosing a new story. That's inner work. The second is embodiment work. So that's actually working with the nervous system and moving those stories literally out of the cells in your body, because these stories don't just exist in your head. They exist in your vagina. They exist in your pussy. They exist in your cock. They exist inside of you, holding tension, stress. They will present in terms of not being able to get wet. They will present in not being able to get hard or stay hard. There's so many ways that these stories will literally present as physical symptoms.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got to do the embodiment work, which for women is the jade egg. For men, it's learning the different sexual kung fu practices from the Taoist tradition.
Sounds fun.
I hate saying
sexual kung fu.
I know, it sounds so ridiculous, but
it's fun though.
Yeah. So there's all these Taoist and Tantric practices that I teach my clients to do on their own. So they do all of the embodiment work on their own, the self-pleasure and the self-training practices to release blockages from their body and their muscles and their tissue. So that's really important. And I think that's kind of the difference between what sex therapists do and kind of what I do is, you're actually doing the things. I mean, I'm sure you give work too, but like, yeah. Do you give self-pleasure practices at all? I'm actually curious to hear what some say.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the client, like what's going on. But yeah, if that's an issue, because I've noticed doing this work, women in particular seem to be uncomfortable with their genitals. Not all, but like I don't really see that a ton with men or people who have a penis, and with women I do. And I do think that there's an element in like how we're socialized. So for those people, it's like, yes, that is part of like the homework. It's like, okay, like how would you feel about doing some masturbation practice? And some of them are kind of open to it. And some of them we kind of have to do more emotional work so that they get to the point where they're, more comfortable or willing to do that. Yeah, because sometimes I do think people have those old beliefs of like, okay, this should just be with a partner, or, I'm not supposed to touch myself, or even like with women, I think some of it is like genitals are yucky or periods are yucky, or like, they smell weird, or, so I think there's all of this kind of self-consciousness and discomfort there. So yeah. So in those cases I do, or if somebody is struggling to orgasm, that's always my first go-to is like, where are you at with masturbation? Let's talk about it. And I still see a lot of it go back to psychological stuff. Like I had a client who was kind of, in theory, pretty comfortable, I think. But like her thing was, well, I kind of tell myself I don't have time to masturbate almost. I'm like, that's interesting. So, we work with whatever comes up, and then I have like with couples, I'll have them do like touch exercises, especially if it's been like a sexless marriage. I'll have them do some like quote unquote sensate focus, but I'm like, not very by the book with that. So we kind of make up like, okay, what kind of touch exercise would be helpful based on where you're at, what's your comfort level, and how can we kind of maybe start with something sensual and then gradually move into something more sexual.
Yeah.
So
beautiful.
So yeah, there's physical homework, but it's not necessarily like Taoist or Tantric, although I would like to learn more of that. And that was actually part of why I became a sex therapist. But like then what they teach is so academic. So I'm kind of like on the hunt for like some good trainings. I was going to do the urban tantra training with Barbara Krellis, but then COVID kind of interfered with that. So,
well, there's such a help, especially for people who've done all of the therapies before and they still find that they're having issues. Is that it's usually the not having done the embodiment practices and the self-pleasure.
Yeah, which makes sense. And I mean, I kind of want to reinforce what you're saying for everyone too. Like there's actual research showing that like our emotions are stored in our body, and so it's like, it's very real in a physical way. And like, even in a yoga class, I always hear yoga teachers being like, oh, well, there's a lot of trauma stored in the hips, like they're constantly saying that about the hips in particular, and so even just kind of doing certain yoga postures like could create like a release for people. And, I even had that a little bit with like the full pigeon pose.
Here. Yeah.
Really?
If you go to a yin yoga class and sit in pigeon for 5 minutes on one side, you are going to have some shit come up. Yes.
Yeah. So I think just, some people have had that with massage. So I think just most of us have probably had that experience, or, I kind of help people tune into like, what does anxiety feel like in your body? Like what does, what's the dread feel like in your body? And so people can usually find like anxiety in their chest or throat and like some tension, and, dread might be like a pit in the stomach feeling. So just even starting to tune into that, like how emotions feel in your body, I think could be a good first step.
Yeah. We go right into that. They learn nervous system release techniques to actually get in touch with sensations in the body and how to release them in complete stress cycles. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go a little bit down the nervous system path, because I've had that come up with a recent client too. And my best friend has been getting more into like the different kind of like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, like all those different kind of nervous system responses. But especially in relationships, like our partner can trigger the fuck out of us, And so even just noticing, are you avoiding sex because you're actually having some kind of like freeze or flight response?
You are, yeah.
Yeah.
You definitely are.
Right. Like you definitely are. And so like learning how to regulate our nervous system is just so key. And I mean, and I think it also ties into the religion stuff, because if you still got these old stories and beliefs, those are probably contributing to how your nervous system responds. Like it all goes together, right?
For sure.
So what nervous system responses do you see most often, and like how do you help people?
Well, if they are in a hypo response, then it's more of a fight response and flight. So you'll flee a situation, or you'll just start picking fights with your partner for no reason. If you're in a freeze response, you're in a hypotrauma response, and that will result in you just feeling depressed, lethargic, not having any sexual desire, not ever initiating. I see more of the hypo responses in my work.
Same.
So definitely more of that, and maybe only about 15-20% on the other end. So yeah, it's mostly working with freeze.
Okay. So if someone comes to you and they're freezing and they're having the hypo,
The fawning is what a lot of my high level clients who have the perfect marriage, yet they don't ever have sex, right? That's a fawn response because
let's break this down. Can you explain? Because I don't know if people listening will even know what the fawn response is. I think that's like a newer one that people have started talking about. So can you tell people what that is?
A fawn response is a people pleaser default. So your nervous system, instead of just freezing completely and shutting down, you'll just read a room really well. You'll read the energy and you'll see like, what do I have to do to make this as non-confrontational as possible? And then you'll adapt and camo yourself. You'll become like a chameleon to adapt to the environment so that you keep the peace. So it's about pretending like everything is great, putting on the happy furry face and going to, the parties together and acting like you're a power couple and you're not at all, that sort of stuff. So that's a fawn response, is just putting the mask on. And often that is like the porn star syndrome is what I call it. Like you just make the sounds because you think that's what you're supposed to sound like and look like. But there's no authenticity to it whatsoever. So that's fine.
Right. Yeah. And I think of that as people, and this is not a judgment or criticism, I want to say, but like you're kind of abandoning yourself in favor of whoever you're trying to please. So, okay. So let's say someone's fawning, because I hear that one a lot too. What do you do with that person to help them regulate in those situations?
Well, okay, there's two parts to it. There's one, like when people work with me, I even give this for free. You can get it in my 5 days to Epic Sex and Pleasure training for free because I want everyone to have access to that. But it teaches you how to complete stress cycles in your nervous system. So it's really feeling into, okay, if I'm constantly showing up and in an authentic way in sex, and I'm just having sex because I think that's what I'm supposed to do, or I just have to. That's my duty as a wife, right? But it's not really authentic, and I'm just doing what I saw in porn. Okay, if that's what you're doing, you would literally like feel into your body and notice, okay, what does it feel like to feel that I have to show up in a way that isn't even authentic to me? What does that actually feel like sensationally in your body? And I give you a list of sensations so you can even start to have words and language for that.
I like that.
Like, does it feel like a contraction? Does it feel like a shutdown? Does it feel like this fluttery energy that bubbles up from inside? Like, what is the actual sensation of it? And then I invite you into nervous system release techniques. There's 6. So that could be anything from pillow punching to throwing a tantrum to grieving, like literally just giving once you tune into that emotion, like be with it instead of running from it or trying to repress it more. And then just notice, what does your body actually want to do with that feeling that you feel inside? When you do that repetitively every day for a month or 2 or 3, you're going to feel like a completely different person because you're completing stress cycles of the fawn response. And when you complete the cycle, your body learns that it doesn't have to go there again, that doesn't have to be the default anymore. So you can be in a regulated state without going to the default. I just have to put the mask on. Right? Because you're teaching your body that you can release that response. And then you can take on pleasure in other ways and learn to connect to pleasure in other ways. So
that's huge. Like what you're sharing with people is so important. And I think like not talked about enough, but it's like, if you don't feel your feelings, if you keep avoiding them, they're going to be stuck in your body. And like you're telling people like, no, you actually have to like process that shit so that it like moves through you and out of you. And then you're going to actually be regulated.
Yeah, exactly.
So good.
Yeah. So you go through it from the nervous system route. You can go through it from the Taoist energetic route of when people show up in that fawn response, and it's all about the show and the flash and how many orgasms did I pretend that I had?
Oh gosh.
Okay. All of that business. That is an indicator that you are in your yang masculine sexuality. and you don't have a solid feminine yin core in your sexuality, and most women don't. So you've got to go build that solid yin feminine core. What does it even mean to be feminine in my sexuality? What does it mean to surrender and let pleasure come to me? What does it mean to relax fully and let all of the breath and the pleasure and the ecstasy fill my body without me having to go get it, right?
Yes. I love that, because our culture is so like hustle and like do, go, faster, more.
Yeah.
Which is super masculine.
So masculine. And right. So that's why I always say
it's not bad. We're not trying to be like eliminate all masculine, but balance.
No, not at all. Because all of that has made you successful in every other area of your life. But it's that conditioning that if you're a feminine woman, it's that conditioning that's actually keeping you from being sexually satisfied. Because if you're a feminine woman, then that's not that being in your masculine trying to go get the 50 orgasms and pretending like you might be having them when you're really not, right? That's all just show and flash and trying to get approval. That's dark feminine bullshit, like wounded feminine shit. But like deep, solid core of a feminine is I'm surrender. I want to be in a surrendered state. I want him to take control. I want to receive pleasure from him. So learning that when all you've ever known is it's challenging. It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. And what about, because one of the things with Tantra that I think is a little tricky is like, it does talk a lot about the polarities of like masculine and feminine. Can that still work for someone who identifies as non-binary?
I really struggle with that one myself, because I personally don't work with people who are, because I don't know. It's not my lived experience. So I don't know how that translates to people who feel that way. But I think that there's a lot of Tantra teachers who do get that and who teach the polarity anyway. And she always taught that we all have both of these energies inside. And
that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because even though like I'm a woman and I was born a woman and I identify as a woman, I definitely have masculine energy.
Yeah. So we all have both in us, and which one you feel predominantly is the type that's the most satisfying to you. Maybe if you're a woman, you enjoy being in your masculine and being a dom, or, really stepping into a dominant space might be really satisfying for you. But, most women, I think, would feel more, it's more natural for them to be in that surrendered, I want him to take the lead, or my partner to take the lead space. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is that something you like help people figure out? Like, do you have some clients where you're like, oh, I think you're kind of a natural dom?
I definitely have had a couple.
Okay.
And I did have one lesbian couple that her partner was definitely more the masculine energy. She had a hard time accepting, I remember her now. Okay. So she had a very, very challenging time connecting with her feminine.
Okay.
But she wanted to desperately. And that was like the state that she desired. She wanted to be able to surrender and let go. But I remember doing an inner feminine integration process with her, and she really struggled connecting with what being in her feminine would even look like. And I think that was partly why she was struggling in her partnership, because her partner was more in the masculine and she was showing up more masculine. And then that polarity wasn't really working.
That makes sense. Yeah. And that is something to think about too in your relationships. It's like if you have two really like alpha people who are showing up in a more masculine way, sometimes I think they might have like hot sex, but also they're just going to clash more. And so it's like, I think it's like finding that balance, in terms of the roles. And like, one of the things I realize is because I think that, I think I was, and I'm maybe still moving, away from being too masculine, but I just feel more relaxed when I'm being more feminine. It's like the hustle energy is stressful. It's like make things happen. I'm like, okay. Because I think someone who's maybe more of like a natural dom, like you said, would feel energized by that state.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's a good indicator in general. Is like, what do you feel energized by, and like what helps you feel more like your best self? And maybe that will kind of point people to, which direction. to lean in. Such interesting work though, just like never boring. Do you work with couples too?
Yeah. So in my private coaching, if they're in a relationship, about halfway through, if their partner is, if they want to join sessions, I will often invite them on, but it is not required.
Okay.
Some people, I'm not ready for their partner to come on. So it's always solo work first. And then if they have a willing and open partner that wants to come on board for sessions, there are some things that can be very valuable. But the whole time they're working with me, they have a date night they do every other week sexually.
Oh, cool.
Together. So it's like communication, connection, and sex date night practices that they're doing that I don't really need to be a part of. It's all they learn how to do it on the video, and it's probably explanatory. So
it's like their homework.
Yeah,
cool. I like that. I like that way of kind of working with people. So it sounds like their partner has to be at least like willing to participate in like the date nights.
They can, but not all of them do. I mean, I have some single women, and obviously they don't need to involve a partner in it.
That's true.
And some partners are too shy to come on, or they just don't want to be a part in it. They don't have any interest in being a part in it. And it's really just for the women anyway. Like they signed up because they know they have blocks and obstacles they want to get through.
Okay.
And they understand my philosophy of like, let's work on your stuff, and then we'll work on the partner if there seems to be a need. But sometimes there won't be a need at all, and sometimes the partners just don't want to, and that's okay.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. I mean, and I do think it's important to prioritize the self-work. And sometimes working with couples, I notice that too. I'm like, I kind of want to work with you guys individually, at least until we get to a certain point.
Exactly. Yeah. I did do couples. I've done several couples, and every time I'm like, this is why I always work with them separately first, because it's so like, not only is it just harder for me, but it's harder for them, and it takes way longer than it should. So if you just,
it can.
Yeah, maybe it's different for you, but I found at least that it just takes longer, because it's like, if I could just get them separated and work with them individually for just like a month or two, then when we come together, it could be so much more effective.
I agree, because you want to have certain skills in place. It's like there's just a higher level of complexity when it's like, when it's me and one person, it's one relationship. When it's me and two people, it's my relationship with each of them individually, and then their relationship, and then me also kind of being the therapist for their relationship. So there's just a lot more layers. And then I'm also kind of managing their interactions and having to be a little bit more directive. And, sometimes it's like, okay, guys, stop.
I have to stop them so many times. Yes.
Yeah. So it's more to manage. So like I do charge more for couples, but it's I don't know, it's kind of fun. Now I like working with couples, but when I first started, I was kind of like maybe I'm just not going to go down this path. Like I did the Gottman like level 1 training for couples counseling, and it was kind of like, okay, this is intense. But I think I kind of got some couples that were like high conflict couples like early on. And so I think that kind of put me off a little bit, because it's like it's the nervous system regulation. I do a lot of parts work, like internal family system stuff. So it's like working with their parts that are being triggered, building the skill of like feeling your emotion in your body, like we talked about. So it's like, if you come to me kind of having some of those skills in place, then the couples work is like probably pretty smooth,
I do not take high conflict couples.
Yeah. I don't really work with that either anymore, but some people do, and bless their hearts.
Bless their freaking heart. I agree. And they definitely need a Gottman person.
For sure. And so if someone is listening and has a high conflict situation, like I will refer you to someone, so you can reach out, but it won't be me or Tilly.
That's right.
Thank you so much for coming on today. Like, this has been really cool. I feel like I learned a couple things, and I'm excited that people listening hopefully picked up on a couple, new ideas and skills. So if people are curious to learn more about you, your business, the work that you do, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, you download the 5 Days to Epic Sex and Pleasure for High Achieving Women training. It's my podcast has a lot of episodes, like 250 episodes on there. So if you want the best of all of that and like everything I teach and want to share with you summed up in a short and sweet thing, you go download that training. That's at tillystorm.com/5-day training. And then the podcast obviously is the Multi-Orgasmic Millionaire.
which is just a fun title. I mentioned that to my best friend. She's like, well, I want to listen to that. She's like, that sounds great. Orgasms and millions of dollars.
Yes.
So anyways, thank you so much for joining. This has been great. Thank you everyone for listening. And we'll put all the links in the show notes from what Tilly mentioned today. So catch you guys next week.
Awesome.